How does patriarchy affect men? Or does it even affect men? Because it's not even in existence, according to Jordan Peterson, right? Let's watch that clip from Jordan Peterson again and then talk about it briefly.
A system of male dominance of society.
Yeah, but that's not my sense of the patriarchy.
So what's yours?
Well, in what sense is our society male-dominated?
The fact that the vast majority of wealth is owned by men, the vast majority of capital is owned by men. Women do more unpaid labor.
Very tiny proportion of men, and a huge proportion of people who are seriously disaffected are men. Most people in prison are men. Most people who are on the street are men. Most victims of violent crime are men. Most people who commit suicide are men. Most people who die in wars are men. People who do worse in school are men. Where's the dominance here precisely? What you're doing is you're taking a tiny substrata of hyper-successful men and using that to represent the entire structure of Western society.
Jordan Peterson is mostly right in his stats about men and their rates of depression and suicide and all these different things. Mostly. When I did my own research, they weren't actually 100% accurate, but that's besides the point on this. Jordan Peterson tries to say that because men are so affected by whatever's happening in society today, it can't be patriarchy. But as we saw in 1A, or if you watch the full episode, we defined patriarchy as a system, not necessarily of male dominance, but as a system of allowing the structure of society to be passed down through the male line, and therefore the men in the society get to rule over everything. It's not necessarily that they dominate everything. Besides the point, what he is missing here is the fact that this is actually a symptom of patriarchy, of that patriarchal structure, and that's what we're going to explore today. How these patriarchal structures affect the men in the society, affect the elites in the society, because nobody gets out scot-free under patriarchy. One of the points I didn't make as strongly as I would have liked to in that segment, so I'm going to make it here. The role of men is so narrowly defined that it puts a lot of pressure on them, and that's why I think we're seeing the rates of depression and suicide on them, especially as we try to unravel this thing, go up and make it seem like patriarchy is not happening, right? You know, just as Ken said, and our other man in that clip that I showed you in 1A about patriarchy is just hidden better nowadays. That's actually what's really happening, but it still has an effect on men. They have so much pressure to maintain that dominance, that hierarchy, their position of power, that they can't truly be who they are themselves. For me, this was so clearly visible in the Bridgeton series with Queen Charlotte and her king that she ended up marrying James, I believe it was, King James, where he couldn't be himself, a neurodivergent person. Of course, they didn't know about neurodivergency back then or mental illness. We're not sure what he had. Of course, this is, a fictional depiction of that time and era. Entertainment's purpose is to over-exaggerate what we see so we can actually see it and be able to understand it in a little different light. If you go watch that series, you see that he's either neurodivergent or ill, mentally ill. He's not able to be that. They can't show that. He has to hide all of that, which makes it even worse, which we know today with psychology that suppressing those type of things actually make them worse. And he also wanted to be a farmer. He didn't want to be a king. He wanted to be a farmer. Again, I don't know if this is historically accurate, but I think it is true that men in high positions of power couldn't ever fully, truly be themselves. They had to hold that line of patriarchal power and dominance, and therefore they had to oppress and suppress, you can use both of them there, their real emotions and their real desires, if they even were able to ever express them and know them from themselves. And I do get into that in this segment. So let's watch that segment now.
I want to take a moment out just to talk about the effects of patriarchy, because I don't think it affects just women and minorities and people of different gender identities. It affects all of us, but in different ways. And peeling back the layers to understand that is part of this work that we're going to be doing as well. So first, let me just say capitalism, which is an offshoot of the creation of patriarchy, of this dominator culture, affects all of them. I think we could agree with that. It is driving all of us into exhaustion and depleting our inner and outer resources at rates that we are not able to replenish. Patriarchy also really hurts men. So let's look at that for a moment. For example, they are taught to suppress their emotions, and that anger and pridefulness are really the only emotions that they're allowed to express. They are taught from a young age, from their play dates, that violence, that rage, that going after others with dominance and oppression is good. And then they take that into their adulthood years where they run the society via politics, the CEO boardroom, and our religions. But where I think it hurts men the most is that it has stopped men from evolving emotionally. In place of them evolving emotionally, women and minorities have had to carry the invisible social and emotional burden of creating and maintaining the society behind them. So now they're getting that ripped away from them and they feel like they're being oppressed. This explains why so many men come out against the feminist movement, because they have to carry the weight of their emotional and social world now. And they're not used to doing that. They're used to being able to mandate the people that they have power and control over to do that for them. And they don't like that. That feels uncomfortable. Of course it does. But it's going to be so important for women that we can't fall back into that homeostasis role of saving them from that uncomfortableness. We have to let them get uncomfortable.
Right, I'm going to jump in here with a little bit of a tangent. I wanted to define the word homeostasis. It actually comes from biology, and it means that any self-regulating process by which a biological system internally tends to try to maintain stability. The stability attained represents a dynamic equilibrium in which continuous change occurs, yet relatively uniform conditions prevail. So this simply means this is the process by which our bodies are constantly receiving feedback from our environment and also from our internal bodies to regulate things such as blood glucose levels, our temperature. Our bodies are always trying to get and stay within homogeneous. If I got that word right, I had to go listen to it. They're trying to always be, at 98.7, our temperature. I think that's what our temperature is. Our glucose levels need to always be at this certain level. If you're a female, your hormones shift and change a lot over the course of the cycle of the month. But there's this baseline for each part of that phase that the body is constantly getting that feedback to try to maintain that system within those homogeneous order, the stability within the inside. But that's the process of homeostasis. It's taking all the biofeedback and trying to make sure that we get back into homogenesis. I can never say the word. This term can also be used in a social aspect, though, and that's what I wanted to really define here. So I wanted to define that in my own words to help you really understand what's happening or what I'm using this word for. To me, it's a process by which the unconscious social system intuits a disturbance in the biosphere, in that social system, and puts pressure on that disturbance to get back in line so the social system can get back to the baseline, which is patriarchy. So an example, I did a TikTok video. I think I put it also on my YouTube if you want to go watch this, but it happened at a football game last season. I was talking to this beautiful elder woman, one of those women that just has gotten to the point in her life where she doesn't give a what about anything around her. I don't think she ever did. She just spoke her mind, and patriarchy doesn't like women speaking their mind. Even though she'd raised the son, for some reason, he was still trying to get her back in line. I mean, I think it had something to do with maybe he didn't want her to embarrass him in front of me, but he was actually the one embarrassing himself by doing this thing called homeostasis and eavesdropping on our conversation and coming over and trying to get her to shut up essentially and be quiet and get back in lines. All the men look great and they don't have to answer to anybody and they don't have to evolve their emotional toolbox because they get to shut everybody up. That's an act of homeostasis.
I believe in the coming years, we're also going to see the shift evolving into the social class system, where the minions of us are not going to take on the burden for the elites anymore. And the elites are going to come out saying that they are now being oppressed because they have to feel the weight of their unevolvedness, if you will, and do the work to evolve with the rest of us. At least that's my hope, in a very creative way. So I'm going to reiterate all of this. This is not a rebellion. This is a wake-up call. It is a wake-up call for the elite and the men that have been benefiting. Again, I don't believe they truly benefit from the society, but benefit from it more than the rest of us, to wake up and do the emotional evolution work that is required of them at this time. And the rest of us to not pick up the homeostasis weight of that for them. that we let them fall down and learn how to pick themselves up. That's just how evolution works. Here's the key. When the masses at the bottom understand this system as I've laid out, then it's going to force evolution to happen. It's going to become undeniable.
This is a little bit more bonus that you're getting and you're not going to get in that full episode that we did, but I was watching the Golden Bachelorette. The man that she ended up picking for the season, Chalk, he made a couple comments that really were red flags to me. The first time it was like, oh, maybe a pink flag, maybe a yellow or orange, whatever you want to use. And then by the second time he said this was a red flag. Now, I'm not going to talk about that red flag as far as, what that potentially could mean for her and her relationship. But I want to point it out here because I think this proves my point that men have been used to women doing the emotional labor in relationships behind the scenes to help hold patriarchy in place. And now we're starting to see that crumble. So he's actually just making it super visible to us that this is something he's struggling with and asking for help. I don't think he should be going to his future partner for that help, but again, that's besides the point. So let's watch these videos here.
Absolutely. And I've been thinking too. Trust me, I've been thinking about us. And, the one thing I wanted to talk to you about was I've had armor up my whole life. Mm-hmm. And it's time I let that down. And I just, I need to do that because I owe that to you and open my heart. It's just very tough for me. That was the thing that I had to tell you is I'm afraid of getting hurt.
Yeah, me too.
And I can't do that, and I'm going to need help because it's not fair to you and it's not fair to me. Well, I got a little emotional today.
Yeah, I know.
And you haven't seen that before. Trust me, I didn't want you to see those emotions. I hide them.
I know, me too, but I'm so glad
but it was from
that.
The heart.
Yeah.
It was. It really was. I just wanted you to know that.
I know you are always super poised, but you don't have to be with me.
I know. It's one of the things I want you to work on.
I know.
So.
What are your thoughts on those videos and how it really displays the fact that men are used to women helping with or taking over that emotional labor? Am I out of place here? Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but let me know your comments. There's one other one I wanted to add here that I actually have already started to develop another episode for us on this one, but it is, how white women and MAGA are also really suffering from patriarchy and how they don't even know it. And that's because of one of the steps that we learned yesterday, how it really talked about the upper class of women and how they're stratified to that system via the financial means and reproductive labor of the women to the men. I'm not going to get into that here, but I just want you to know that is one I'm very conscious of working on and helping us understand it so that we can possibly help with that situation. They also are really suffering, even though we don't see it. We see them just benefiting from society. We have to peel back the layers to really see how they're suffering, even though we don't see it, even though it's invisible in our society, is what is keeping them from actually voting for their rights and voting actually against their rights. What was your golden nugget from this section? Were you aware of just how much men might be suffering under this system? Does this help you take off that blame game off of men? Again, individual men have to actually do the work to help evolve and get out of patriarchy and do that emotional evolution. But my point here is helping you to have some more understanding, not that you're going to give them a bye, but that maybe you can actually, I hate to say this, but help them evolve, even though that's their work. But at least you can point them in the right direction, right? Maybe that's what we're doing here. So here's your tool for today after you have that golden nugget. The map is not the territory. The map is not the territory. So in order to change our behaviors and thus our thought patterns, we have to change our behaviors, which then therefore will change our thought patterns. So this is a tool I used a lot when I was doing a lot more of the somatic work, especially with freeform movement. So if you think about even physically, we move in vertical planes. We move in the vertical and then the horizontal, right? Our emotions are here. They're not circular like a dancer who's doing freeform movement is doing. So our brains are patterned off of the way we move and off of the way we take to work or the way we take to our appointments or the way we get home. So the map is not the territory means how can you change your pattern so that the map in your head doesn't become the territory in the world that you're working and walking and moving through. So can you take a different way to work? Can you take a different way to your appointments? Can you take a different way to your home on the way home? Can you go to a different grocery store? Can you go to a different restaurant and order something different, or go to the same restaurant and order something different. Take little opportunities to change up your behavior patterns within reasonable, you don't want to become somebody you're not, but the more you are open to keeping that neuroplasticity in your mind, the easier it will be to shift out of patriarchy, shift out of that patriarchal lens I keep talking about, and see the world in a completely new way. But you have to start changing that map and realizing that the map is not the territory. It's not the same thing. Sit with that. Let me know if you have any questions. Make sure you join us on Wednesdays for our live at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, where we will answer your questions and go deeper into all of this material. Hopefully I'll be able to answer your questions. You might stump me, and that's completely okay, but that's what that time is for, so we can work through that. All right, till next time. Bye-bye. But I think, again, entertainment's purpose is to over-exaggerate. Entertainment's purpose is to over-exaggerate. Entertainment's purpose is